This is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to the fourth webinar of Qigong Coaching Certification Program and Qidao Apprenticeship. I appreciate you taking the time and dedicating your energy, your time, and your resources to learning how to become an efficient and successful Qigong coach. Today, I would like to dive deeper with you into exploring the specific techniques and step-by-step applications of the principles of energy awareness when it applies to Qigong coaching, and also how to create a game plan, a strategic plan of action for your coaching clients. Obviously, not all coaching clients need a game plan or a strategy to achieve what they aspire to achieve, but most of them do need it. And the reason for that is very simple. They are not quite at the point on their journey where they want to be. In other words, we all are experiencing a journey through life, including your coaching clients. Now, when your coaching clients come to you seeking your help, or perhaps you just simply offered them a complimentary coaching session, and they say, well, yeah, this is really interesting, I would like to receive some help from you, they probably recognize that there is a difference between where they're at and where they want to be in their lives. We already covered the subject of identifying specific areas of life which may be pertinent to your coaching clients, which they need to pay attention to. Remember, the 6 slices of the pie chart include health and wellness, career and finances, hobbies and sports, intimate and personal relationships, social relationships and social contribution, and personal and spiritual development. Now, when we look at each of these areas of life, they're not usually all equally developed. In other words, the person often would have either one area of life or another more highly developed. Perhaps it may be 2 or 3 that are developed better than others. And there's going to be at least 1 or sometimes several that are less developed. And the greater there is imbalance between the highly developed and less developed areas of life, the more obvious it is that the less developed area of life needs more attention. Makes sense, right? Now, when you start working with your coaching client on boosting that area of life, specifically improving the quality of life in that area, they may feel like they don't really even know how to get where they want to be. So basically, if they knew how to get there, probably they would have been there by now, or they would be pretty confident that they can get there over a certain period of time. They would not need coaching. Usually people need coaching when they're not so sure, or when they feel like they've been running into one roadblock after another and they haven't figured out how to overcome them. And that's why they need some coaching. They need some help from you. Purportedly, you are the person who has already traveled along this path, who already has a certain level of experience overcoming the obstacles along the path, navigating around certain pitfalls, and figuring out how to get past certain roadblocks along the way. Now, if you haven't figured that out, don't fret. I've worked with plenty of coaching clients that traveled along the path that I personally had no experience with. For example, I've worked with world-class athletes in disciplines ranging from fencing to ice skating. And I don't fence and I don't ice skate. Well, I used to when I was a kid, but it was not a very successful experience for me. So I had no idea how to overcome the obstacle along the path of becoming a world-class ice skater or the Olympic fencer. But I knew how to overcome obstacles along pretty much any way. And so I could help my coaching clients achieve what they aspired to achieve. There is also a simple and elegant methodology that I'm going to share with you today that is going to help you do the same thing for your coaching clients so that they will feel like they're really getting a tremendous value from working with you. First of all, we are going to focus on understanding the journey that the person has been on already. So, I would suggest asking a coaching client a simple question. Can you describe to me your journey over the last 10 or 5 years associated with this particular aspect of your life that you want to work on? Meaning, if they've had some health issues, they may describe to you certain milestones along that path. If they've had some issues associated with career or finances, well, again, they would need to describe to you where they have been and what their path has been over the last 5 or 10 years in regard to career and finances. The same applies to hobbies and sports or relationships and so on. That essentially will give your coaching client an opportunity to recognize that they have been on the path. And they are still on the path. The question is, are they on the right path? It is not an opportunity for them to bitch and moan about the past problems that they've ran into. Believe me, many people will want to do exactly that. And there is a really strong need, a necessity to cut to the chase, not to get engulfed in their storytelling about the past. But it's important to recognize that they have been on the path and ask them to identify specific milestones or certain junctures along the path that they consider turning points. That will essentially give them this sense of continuous journey that they have been on. And the next obvious question will be from you. Where would you like to be next year, for example, or in the next 2 years from now, if you continue progressing along this path? Will you be where you want to be? Some people say yes, I'm on the right track, I just need to keep going. Some people will say no, I'm not on the right track and I need to change my path or perhaps switch to a different path altogether. Obviously, this is going to be an opportunity for you to ask for a great deal of details about the specific dream that they want to manifest. Because if they don't have any ideas or any details about the dream they want to manifest, the likelihood of them manifesting it is going to be slim to none, just because they have no idea where they're going. Maybe they will get somewhere and they will be okay with that. Maybe they won't be okay with that. There's no telling. If you want to help them to achieve something that they really want and resonate with, more importantly, to get what they need. So we start asking them questions about the details of where they aspire to be in the next year, for example. They may tell you some details, they may give you certain ideas about where they want to be. The primary objective for you is to keep asking them to imagine being there. And specifically, what would be the way of being associated with accomplishing that? How would you need to be so that you would achieve what you aspire to achieve? How would it need to be so that you would be able to manifest and live your dream? That essentially gives the person an invitation to switch from the mode of having, or even mode of doing, into the mode of being. Because it's asking them about the way of being. How would you need to be? That's an ontological question, rather than a question about what you need to possess, or what you need to be doing, which are important but secondary to the ontological question of how you need to be. And most people don't really know what it means. How do I need to be? What's the way of being? So we help them out. My favorite way to help a coaching client out in this kind of a situation is by asking them to imagine that they could see themselves from the point of view of a fly on a wall in that moment or in that period of time in their lives when they actually are making the dream come true. Let me repeat it again. If you perceive yourself from the point of view of a fly on a wall, and the fly on a wall doesn't care about the appearances, it just perceives energy, how would you describe the energy that you would need to have in order to manifest your dream? You see what happens? We help the person reorient their attention, refocus their imagination, their vision from what they are going to look like, or from the environment, how the environment is going to look, to focusing on their own energy. And that essentially gives them access to recognizing certain energy resources that otherwise perhaps would not be available to them because they wouldn't know even to look for them. What we do next is something paradoxical and not always pleasant to our clients. We ask them to come back to the present moment and observe themselves from the same perspective of fly on a wall again, in the present moment. How would you describe the energy associated with the current state of affairs? When I'm talking about describing energy, we're talking about anything from sense of color, to sense of movement, to texture, vibration, any type of density or other qualities that people may come up with. Obviously, when we talk about energy, it's both the representation of the physical state and also with the mental state at the same time. It's the glue that keeps together the two sides of the coin, or it's the material that the coin is made of that keeps the heads and tails together, so to speak. So if we're talking about the mind and body, our attention is not on either one of them so much, but rather on the energetic essence of human being that keeps the mind and body together. So we ask our coaching clients to imagine being able to perceive themselves from the fly on the wall's perspective at the present moment, and ask them to describe the current energy, the energy associated with the current state of affairs. Virtually guaranteed it's not going to be the same as the energy associated with the process of manifesting the dreams. Why? Because if they had access to that energy, they would be manifesting the dreams right now. They would be living their dreams. They would not need our help. However, in 99.9% cases, there is a major, or sometimes not so great, but noticeable discrepancy between the current state of affairs and the energy associated with the dream state. If there is this discrepancy, we know how to work with it. You probably remember the practice of harmonizing polarities. It's something that I introduced at the basic level of Qigong training, but it's actually a rather sophisticated and very powerful practice. So the fact that I introduced it at the basic level of Qigong training does not mean that it is basic. It's fundamental. It's very essential. And what happens when we practice this particular energy practice, harmonizing polarities? We just simply invite two of these energies to occupy the hands one at a time. So basically, the right hand is going to feel one way, the left hand is going to feel another way. One of these hands will be more in alignment, more in resonance with the energy associated with the current state of affairs. And the other hand is likely to resonate better with the energy associated with the dream state. The state associated with the manifestation of the dream. So we ask them to identify which hand is associated with the current state, which hand is associated with the dream state. There is no assumption or expectation as to which of these hands should be associated with which. That's very important. We let the coaching client pick and choose. Some people will choose one way, some people will choose the other way. It doesn't matter really. What does matter is what happens next. We ask them to feel what it feels like to have these two different energies sitting on the palms of their hands. And then most likely there's going to be some difference in sensations. One may feel heavier than the other. There may be some tingling or twitching associated with one energy more so than the other. There may be some movement associated with one energy more so than the other energy. One energy may feel vibrant, the other one may feel stagnant. One energy may feel lighter or darker, not only lighter and heavier, but also in terms of the degree of darkness. There may also be various other components. Like I said, it may be the texture, it may be the density, it may be the color of energy. So there is nothing wrong with the way that people experience it, whichever way they experience it. But what happens then is we invite them to consider the possibility that these energies don't always have to be so polarized. In other words, when the person is holding both of these energies in the palms of the hands, it may be a perfect opportunity for these energies to start communicating with each other. Start learning whatever they can learn from each other. Sharing whatever they can share with each other. How do we know that this process is happening? At first, there may be no movement. The person may be just standing like this with the hands out, palms up, and sometimes they may spend a minute or two or three just not moving at all or exhibiting minute movements. We observe the minute movements because they're important. For example, some people may experience that the hands are getting closer and closer. All we need to do is to make an observation of fact. Oh, I notice that the hands are getting closer. Some people may experience that one hand is going one way, the other hand is going the other way, or vice versa. Again, all we need to do is to make an observation. Oh, interesting how your hands are beginning to move in their own ways. Isn't it fascinating how the energy begins to guide your body in the most authentic and spontaneous manner? Now, most people will be nodding their heads, or at least mentally making a note to themselves that yes, this is fascinating, because they are not trying to move. If they're trying to move in any type of premeditated manner, please stop them and remind them to move only when they feel like being moved by the energy. Not when they decide to move one way or another, but instead allowing energy to just spontaneously animate their bodies, starting with the hands, maybe even just fingers. Sometimes the fingers may start curling. Sometimes the fingers may start getting more open, or palms start opening up. Some people experience the movement in the hands turning the palms more towards each other. We essentially, again, just make an observation of fact. Isn't that interesting? How your hands now start facing each other more comfortably. It's like they actually become more okay with facing each other and communicating more directly. What happens is that the person essentially will start experiencing a change in the pattern of movement, in the holding pattern in their body, and most prominently in the breathing pattern. By that I mean that the breathing pattern will change when and to the degree they experience harmonization of these previously polarized energies. By harmonization I mean they will actually experience like they're not struggling to contain these two seemingly polarized energies. Basically, they are not struggling as much. What happens mentally is that they may actually be learning the lessons that these energies may be providing to each other. It's not always that the future energy associated with the dream will have something to teach the current state of affairs energy. Sometimes it goes the other way. We actually need to recognize that neither one of them is good or bad. We simply accept them the way they are and allow them to express themselves through movement. Sometimes they also express themselves verbally. A person may actually vocalize what one energy has to say to the other, and vice versa. Sometimes there's quite a bit of bickering or dialogue happening. Sometimes they not only share what they need to share, but also express what they feel about each other. Sometimes they feel animosity, sometimes they feel confusion, sometimes they feel love for each other, or longing to be together, and feeling that it's been so unpleasant to be separated for so long. What happens here is that we allow these energies to reconcile with each other. Whatever differences they had, whatever discrepancies they had, the more they learn from each other, the more they share the values, the more similar the values of each of these hands become. The more similar the energies become to each other. In other words, they start resonating with each other better. And the more there is resonance, the less there's going to be tension in the person's body. Why? Because the central nervous system of the person who holds onto this belief system that there is almost an impossibility, or at least a polarization between the current state of affairs and the dream state. There is a lack of communication, there is a lack of understanding. If a person holds onto that kind of belief system, the central nervous system is agitated. By agitation, I also mean it sends more signals to the body, so that the muscles throughout the body are more tense. That's one of the reasons why people hold tension in their bodies. Chronic tension, sometimes for years. It's because they have internal conflict between certain values, between certain beliefs, or between the way that they perceive themselves as opposed to the way that they would need to be in order to manifest and live their dreams. So the greater there's discrepancy, the more there is physical discomfort and tension. But when these energies start harmonizing their polarities, or integrating into a more unified energy field, and experiencing greater harmony, the more a central nervous system becomes relaxed, which also means it sends fewer signals of contraction to the muscles throughout the body, which includes the diaphragm, the breathing muscle. What happens to the breath when the diaphragm becomes more relaxed? Well, one of two things, maybe one of three things. The breathing either becomes deeper, or the person has a sigh of relief as they release tension, or they start yawning, which in and of itself is an extremely powerful meditation technique, as you know already, that puts the person into an altered state of consciousness. And we allow them to experience this state of consciousness and enjoy it. It often takes just a few minutes for the person to achieve this amazing level of internal reconciliation and inner peace that they could only dream of for many years. And most interestingly, we also want to bring to the person's attention that this is what happens. Because sometimes they will not notice it. Or they're in an altered state and they take it for granted. So we actually make an observation of an observation of fact statement. Such as, isn't that interesting how your body becomes more relaxed when your energies find greater extent of harmony with each other, or they formulate a way to be together, forming a unified energy field. This is something that physicists are still struggling to comprehend. The unified energy field is the holy grail of theoretical physicists, as you may know, but we actually experience it viscerally in our physical bodies and energetically and kinesthetically. And most importantly, we bring to our clients' attention that this is what they've just experienced. We want them to really recognize the true essence of this remarkable transformative event. Because if they take it for granted, they will glaze over, or they will just forget that it even happened. Often it's so far removed from their habitual state of mind that, as you may know, memory is state dependent. So when they revert back to their habitual state of consciousness, they won't be able to even remember that this happened. We want them to remember it and to anchor it so that they can tap into that memory again and again and quickly restore this level of inner peace and harmony. How do we do that? Once they have achieved the unification of these energies, we invite them to bring this energy field or energy ball into the body. Sometimes I even ask prior to this exercise to identify any particular part of the body where the energy associated with the current state of affairs resides, and or also the energy associated with the dream state. If there was any particular part of the body where you could find the highest concentration of the energy associated with that way of being that would assist you in manifesting a dream, where would it be? Some people say it's in the head, some people say it's in the heels, some people say it's somewhere in between. Essentially, we have no judgments or expectations as to where it should be. We just simply allow them to find the home of that particular type of energy. And when they bring this unified energy field into their bodies, sometimes it will go in one place or another. We don't have to tell them where in the body to bring this energy. We invite them to watch where this energy would actually find the most appropriate placement for itself. In other words, there is some part of their body and some aspect of the energy system that resonates with that energy. We simply invite them to let energy flow wherever it needs to flow to find home. Once that energy finds home, we recognize that particular part of the body, for being the anchor that would allow us to tap into the state of consciousness associated with that energy and bring that energy up and put it into the driver's seat so that it can become the primary driving force, propelling the person down this path of manifestation of their dreams. That's right. If they try to travel down the path using as a driving force some other type of energy, most likely it's going to take him down a different path. Or it's not going to go down this path and it's going to get stuck somewhere. That's one of the reasons why people have a hard time following down the particular path that leads them to the manifestation of their dreams, is because they're using the wrong energy that doesn't resonate with that path. Now, it may sound really obvious to you and me, but it may not sound obvious to your coaching clients because they're not familiar with this very simple and elegant understanding of energy dynamics. And we need to help them discover it for themselves. Instead of lecturing, we want to help them gain an experience. Now, we can mention it and perhaps give them a little bit of a warning that this is going to happen. But once they really feel that energy integrated into a unified field and allow this energy to find its home in their physical body, they may take a little bit of time to find the appropriate place for it. And sometimes it may not be just one spot. There may be a relatively large area of the body. So for example, it may be the entire chest, or it may be the entire abdomen, or sometimes the whole spine. Sometimes it can be somewhere in the limbs. It really doesn't matter that much. What matters is that we can tap into that energy by simply touching that part of the body where that energy has been anchored. We quite literally tap that part of the body. Now, there are some energy practices associated with so-called tapping. It's not the same thing. We are not tapping and reciting certain incantations or affirmations. Now, I'm nothing against affirmations. Sometimes they can be helpful. Sometimes they can be quite transformative. What we're looking for is not just verbalizing the discovery of that new state of consciousness and new way of being associated with that energy. We want to embody it. So, if necessary, the person can use certain verbal cues as well. For example, they may recall certain value associated with this energy. Let's say courage. Oh yes, I remember what it feels like to be courageous when I just touch certain part of my body that may be associated with that energy, that feels like home for that energy that I just discovered through this exercise. It may be something else, completely different quality of consciousness, for instance, compassion, or it can be curiosity, or it can be forgiveness, or whatever that particular state and that particular emotional expression may be. Maybe it's pursuing one's passions. Maybe it's learning a great deal more. So whatever that state is, we learn how to tap into that energy resource, bring it to the foreground, making it a driving force that would let the person travel down this path, propelling them along this path, not letting them stop or get stuck. And if this energy is their primary driving force, they will feel a lot more motivated, they will feel a lot more capable, they will believe in themselves. And if they feel like they lose motivation or no longer believe themselves for whatever reason, often it's just a matter of remembering what it's like to be in that way. That way of being, for example, courageous or learning or more compassionate or whatever, is something that they sometimes forget. They may shift into a different state of consciousness, and like I said, memory is state dependent, so it may just disappear from their memory. Just like dreams often disappear in the morning when you wake up from the whole night busy dreaming. You may actually have a hard time recalling what dreams you had the previous night. So, what we learn is how to practice remembrance, how to practice reminding ourselves about the achievement of this transcendent state of consciousness. When I say it's transcendent state of consciousness, I'm not just giving it a credit where it's not due. I'm actually giving it credit where it is due, because it's the state of consciousness that literally integrates the current state of affairs with the dream state. What happens when you integrate the current state of affairs, where you are at the present moment, with the dream state? You realize you're dreaming. Sometimes I ask my coaching clients, do you recognize you're awake? Most people say yes, I do recognize I'm awake. Some people say, I wish I would be more awake. Okay, how would you know that you're more awake? One of the qualities of awake consciousness, of enlightened consciousness, is a recognition that what is happening, the true nature of our experience, is a dream. In other words, it's awakening within this dream called daily life. Now, what happens when you bring together the current state of affairs and the dream state into a unified state? You also experience the exact same thing. You actually experience an enlightening moment where the energies are integrated, and therefore the state of affairs associated with the current state and the dream state, something that the person was only hoping to experience or dreaming about, they actually become unified as well. You actually can experience an enlightenment, perhaps a certain intensity of enlightenment, in that very moment, if you realize that you are in a dream state right here, right now, being awake in this dream. If we recognize that this is one of the definitions of enlightenment, then welcome to Nirvana, my friend. You actually are experiencing the enlightening, transcendent moment. All you need to do is to remember what it's like to actually be this way on a consistent basis. If you can do this for your coaching clients, you are providing them the value that they didn't even know was possible to receive through coaching. Often people believe that they cannot become enlightened in this lifetime, or they never even try because they think it's too hard. You have to be a Tibetan Lama to achieve that. And I'm here to tell you that anyone can achieve it. It's not permanent, so like I always say, even after the most profound awakenings, we all have tendency to fall asleep, which is not a problem. It's just an invitation to get back on track, to get back into that enlightened state over and over again, making it easier to get back into it. The longer we spend in that enlightened state, in which we recognize that we are living the dream, the longer we experience enlightenment. So the age of enlightenment is not when everybody is enlightened all the time, but it's the experience when some people are more enlightened than others, and people experience enlightenment for longer periods of time, and perhaps deeper degrees or greater degrees of enlightenment. So, we essentially help the person experience enlightenment in regard to a specific area of life. Whether it is enlightenment in regard to health and wellness, or personal and spiritual development, or any other slice of pie on the pie chart that we've been working with. We can also translate similar type of enlightening experience into other areas of life, which basically means that we're bringing more enlightenment in the person's life. And the more that person experiences enlightenment in various areas of life, the more they realize that they don't just experience enlightenment when they go to a Buddhist temple or a synagogue or a church, or when they consider that they're doing something spiritual. They can experience enlightenment when they're playing hockey, or when they're making love, or when they're eating dinner. They can experience enlightenment on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, that's also when they experience greater state of flow. So that release of tension or greater relaxation, focus on things that we resonate with, and recognition that we are living a dream, all of them contribute to experiencing greater sense of flow. And when you are in the flow, you can perform better. So it's not like when you're enlightened, you actually lose ability to function as a functional human being. Quite on the contrary, you become a more functional human being. You become a more pleasant being to be around, more compassionate, more friendly, more understanding. You also may be a more effective communicator. So you can apply this to business. You can be more productive or more creative. You can be a better lover. You can be a better father or mother. You can be a better friend. In other words, wherever you go, you will be better off when you're in the flow. Now that is also what you can bring to coaching. When you are a coach who is in the flow, you become a better coach. And it rubs off of you onto your coaching clients. You can't really teach how to be in the flow if you're not in the flow yourself. But when you're in the flow, it starts rubbing off of you onto the people around you. And so the coaching clients will actually start experiencing more and more of that flow themselves when they're around you. It may even happen long distance. Many of my coaching clients receive my sessions through a video chat, and they still report to me quite often that they thrive more as a result of not only receiving my coaching but also just being in my presence. What does it mean? The presence matters. You actually have to be fully present so that you would have that kind of presence. You would be fully awake in this dream called life. So you can be the role model of awakening. But you also have the methodology for helping your coaching clients to experience that as well. Now, the second aspect of the strategic planning that I wanted to dive into today has to do with developing the game plan, helping the person achieve what they aspire to achieve easier. If it was really easy, most people would already be doing whatever they needed to be doing to achieve that. They would not need any coaching. It may be simple, but not so easy. And what that means is that people often overcomplicate or just simply are afraid of taking steps. One of the reasons why is because they are thinking about what is my next step that I should take, and what's the step after that I should take, and what is the step after that I should take to travel along this path. Now, there is nothing wrong with that way of thinking. However, it often doesn't help because it feels like it's daunting and challenging and often confusing journey. So instead of trying to figure out the next step and the next step, we actually take the journey in reverse. I quite literally ask my coaching clients to divide in half the timeline between now and the point in time by which they aspire to manifest the dream. For example, we were talking about a whole year as the length of a coaching program, or at least the distance in time that we ask the person to visualize where they would like to be by the end of the year. It may be a greater length of time, it may be a shorter length of time. Let's just use a year as a simple length of time for this particular purpose. So we divide it in half. You literally ask your coaching client, where do you need to be in 6 months from today? So that you would feel like you're on the right track, you're going in the right direction, doing the right thing to achieve your dream, to manifest your dream in 6 more months. That actually may be a lot easier for the person to think about and to visualize than figuring out the immediate next steps. Great. Let them come up with a certain image, with a certain vision of where they need to be in 6 months. And then ask them, again, to visualize from point of view of a fly in a wall. What kind of energy they would need to exhibit, or what would be the way of being associated with that juncture on their journey. That's right. There may be a different energy that needs to be in 6 months as compared to the current energy. As a matter of fact, if they're progressing, there will be a difference in the energy. It may not be the same energy as the one associated with a year from now point in time, but it may be somewhere in between. Once they identified that energy, we can also do another exercise, harmonizing polarities between the 6 month point in time. It's another dream, another vision that we ask them to come up with. The dream state has a certain energy. Let's imagine it on the palm of one hand, whichever hand it might be. Let's bring the current state of affairs in the palm of the other hand. Again, this is an invitation to practice harmonizing polarity meditation, in which these energies will eventually begin to understand each other better and harmonize with each other, forming a unified energy field. Then, let's bring it into the body. Let's make sure that we anchor the energy in whatever part of the body it finds its home. This essentially gives you an idea about breaking this piece of timeline in half again. That's right. We are going to look at 3 month juncture and ask the coaching client, where would you need to be in 3 months from now that would make you feel like you're on the right track, you're going in the right direction, doing the right thing, so that in 3 more months you would be able to manifest what you just described a few minutes ago as where you need to be in 6 months point in time. What do we do next? We do another harmonizing polarity practice. Or just simply ask the coaching client, again, divide it in half. Where would you need to be in a month and a half from now? So just 6 weeks from today. So that you would feel like you're on the right track, going in the right direction, doing whatever you need to be doing to make it so that in another month and a half you would be where you just said you would need to be, 3 month point in time. Again, let's discover the energy associated with a month and a half from now point on the timeline. And if necessary, do another harmonizing polarity exercise. After a few of those, the person will really feel comfortable doing this quickly and eventually almost instantaneously. They basically recognize that, oh yes, this dream and the current state of affairs, they're getting closer and closer. Especially when you divide the 6 weeks period of time in half again? Where would you need to be in 3 weeks from now, just 21 days from now, so that you would feel like you're on the right track, you're going in the right direction, doing whatever you need to be doing to manifest what you just described you would need to manifest at the month and a half point in time. Again, what would be the energy associated with this 3-week date that would be most appropriate, most beneficial for you? Do you need to anchor it? Let's find out where it can be anchored. Let the energy find its home. The more a person does this exercise, the more he or she brings energy into the physical body, the more they get used to embodying these energies, the more they get comfortable with the idea of connecting with these anchors and invoking these energies. Now let's make it even closer to the present moment. Let's divide 3 weeks in half again. So where would you need to be 10 days from now so that you would feel like you're on the right track, going in the right direction, doing whatever you need to be doing to achieve what you need to achieve in 20 days or in 3 weeks period of time? Again, what would be the energy associated with that way of being? Let's find the home for that energy. And then do another harmonizing polarity practice if necessary, and find a home for this energy. What's going to happen then? Maybe you need to divide this 10 days in half again. What's going to happen if you look at 5 days from now juncture? It's less than a week. Suddenly, it's so obvious, it's so clear what the next steps might need to be that most people start laughing. They realize, oh my God, this is not such a scary proposition. It's not a daunting task anymore. It's obvious, it's clear as day, and it's not scary. That means they have overcome the huge hurdle that most people encounter when they try to create such a strategy for themselves. Not only did they figure out what their next step needs to be, or next juncture maybe 5 days from now, less than a week. So if you see the client on a weekly basis, they already should be way ahead of game by the time you speak to them next time. Even more importantly, they have the whole strategy for an entire year much more obvious and clear to them, because they realize, oh, this is where I need to be a month and 3 months and 6 months from now. If they need to, they can also figure out whether they need to be at 9 months point in time or 10 or 11 months. You can break a second part of the year down as well. But I usually focus on the first half of the year or even first 3 months the most. Basically, the closer to the present time, the more focus it requires, because this is where the work is actually going to be happening. Now, if the work doesn't get done in the next few weeks, the likelihood of the person progressing along the path is going to be negligible, because they didn't get very far along this path in the first few weeks or few months. So what's the likelihood of them actually catching up if they were either stuck or they're slacking off the first part of their coaching program? They need to hit the ground running. They need to understand why they're doing this, where they're going, what that's going to provide them, develop a sense of clarity and confidence that they can do it. And in addition to that, they also see clearly that there are actionable steps that they need to take in order to manifest what they dream of. And if that's not enough, they also facilitate the awakened consciousness by inviting them to become awake in this dream called life, by repeatedly performing the practice of harmonizing polarities. So they really get a lot more than they bargained for. And as they practice remembrance, they will be able to revisit this state of consciousness at will. Initially, that may be challenging for them, so you can facilitate these experiences a few times. Also serve as a role model of awakening or enlightenment. If you serve as a role model, that means that you also do this practice yourself. And I often do this practice at the same time as my coaching clients are working on their issues. And my issues are usually pretty simple and straightforward. I need to be more and more in the flow. So I help myself be more in the flow, and by doing so, I also help my coaching clients to experience the same. You've experienced it yourself. You know what it feels like to be in the flow. You know what it feels like to be coached by me. But of course, we'll continue doing that over the course of our entire apprenticeship program. I look forward to our next coaching session. If you come up with any questions between now and then, feel free to email me or just simply ask me during our next coaching session. I look forward to seeing you then. Namaste.